Well, this video is going to prove to be a little bit controversial. Also, if I sound like crap and my voice is all weird, it's because I've got a cold. But there is a very weird pattern that I've observed in Japanese media, where the most bleak, brutal, horrendously grimdark worlds that you can imagine tend to be created by very wholesome guys. As you can see here, Junji Ito, the famed pioneer of phobias that you didn't even know you had, is quite a whimsical fellow. Similarly, Berserk might have actually gotten an ending if Kentaro Miura wasn't moonlighting as the idol master. And Hidetaka Miyazaki, well, he's done a lot to hurt me personally, but he gets a pass. Because he's just a little bit of a scamp who just can't help himself. My point is, a lot of the darkest Japanese media is created by a bunch of actually very happy, whimsical and goofy little goobers. And if that's the case, then imagine the kind of character that would spend his career lovingly handcrafting hopeful, cozy and wholesome tales with pacifist and environmentalist themes. Stories where the antagonists aren't really villains if they even have much actual conflict at all. The man behind those must be a wonderful, amazing, and kind person. Well, he isn't. In fact, Hayao Miyazaki is a complete arsehole. And a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Yep, that was me. Yep, that was me. No, I wasn't drunk. Stop yelling at me. Stop yelling at me. Sorry about that. That was just my accountant phoning me to tell me off for being a dummy with my money. Because apparently spending 12 grand on Easter eggs to start a bunny farm is not only stupid, but also a bad financial decision. Not helped by the fact that it's an off-season for them. Now, having said that, my financial situation would be orders of magnitude worse if not for the help of today's sponsor, PDS Debt. Indeed, PDS Debt are here for you when you feel your finances are slipping out of your hands, as they will help you to sort out your debts. With customised and personalised plans just for you, PDS Debt is sure to get your bank account out of that rut that you've found it in. Now, my little pet, don't you fret, because PDS Debt has no minimum credit score requirements and is rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau, with thousands of 5-star reviews and even a glowing endorsement from Trustpilot. So don't you worry about dodgy dealings, because PDS Debt are airtight. If I wasn't an absolute super genius with dummies keeping me accountable for my own insane intellect, I'd definitely use PDS Debt to help keep my books balanced. But you could do with it. So mosey on down to pdsdebt.com/Dankula to get a free assessment and find out the best option for you. Again, that is pdsdebt.com/Dankula to get a free assessment for the best option for you. Don't let those pesky creditors win, let PDS Debt help. And now, back to the video. Yeah, I'd still like to go ahead. But can we make it 15,000 eggs? For better or worse, Hayao Miyazaki lives for his work, where he synthesizes unbelievable amounts of hopium every single time that projector hits the silver screen. As he said about Howl's Moving Castle, we hope that, through the movie, people can keep up their courage and see the hope. The future world is still nice and beautiful. It is worthy for us to survive and explore it. And if the indomitable human spirit isn't enough for you, Miyazaki also draws the best fucking food that you have ever seen. But outside of that, he's a fucking miserable bastard. While Miyazaki may talk a lot about being optimistic and relentlessly searches for whatever hope he can for others in his work, he has basically none at all for himself. You see, baby Miyazaki developed Sapiens right as the biggest war in history raged all around him. And then, all of a sudden, the literal fucking sun was dropped on his country for basically no reason. Twice. Japan developed something of a complex over this, as you would imagine. So it's no wonder that being of the first generation to grow up at the very beginning of this spiritual and existential nightmare, that not only was Miyazaki absolutely steeped in that generational trauma, but it also formed an integral aspect of anime itself as it developed in the post-war era. I mean, have you ever wondered why Studio Warm and Fuzzy's third ever outing was literally Japanese Watership Down? And why war acts as a backdrop to almost all of Miyazaki's work? I would say that this theme manifests itself most overtly in The Wind Rises, wherein a passionate aeronautical engineer grapples with guilt over the flying machines that he lovingly dreamt up for their beauty and elegance being used to kill people. Thankfully, subsequent generations of engineers have evolved a defense mechanism called autism, which protects them from this gay moralizing because now they fucking love war. All of this is to say that one could understand why Miyazaki is congenitally jaded. And just like many of you sensitive young men at TM in the audience, Miyazaki harbours an utter hatred of modernity, where, quote, everything is so thin and shallow and fake. And he's really looking forward to when, quote, developers go bankrupt, Japan gets poorer, and wild grasses take over. He shows a refreshing understanding that GDP line go up worship is just utterly suicidal. Especially since the Japanese are seeing where that mindset actually leads. Where they're all working 90-hour weeks and not having children, thereby sacrificing their own lives to build a really strong economy and future that will be inherited by fucking no one. Miyazaki is also a massive environmentalist who advocates for simpler living and a more harmonious relationship with nature, which led him to repeat a lot of Al Gore's rhetoric in a 2005 New Yorker profile. However, while Gore's tone was very much one of fear and doom, Miyazaki actually seems very excited by the prospect of human ecological collapse, saying, and I quote, with mass consumption continuing as it is, we will have less than 50 years. Then it will all be like Venice. I think maybe less, more like 40. I'm hoping that I'll live for another 30 years. I would like to see Manhattan underwater. I would like to see when the human population plummets and there are no more high-rises because nobody's buying them. I'm excited about that. Money and desire, all that is going to collapse, and wild green grasses are going to take over. Well, World Economic Forum talking points aside, Miyazaki is so passionate about grass that despite being very close to being a boomer himself, he is very, very excited for the day of the pillow. Because, quote, there's an abandoned house near mine, and I want to buy it and keep it wild. Let all of the wild grasses grow over it. It's amazing how much they grow. They're living energy. I wouldn't cut the grass at all. But then there's always the old ladies who come along with their hedge trimmers and scold you. We'll have to wait for that generation to die off. Until then, we'll never see grass like I want to see grass. Go the fuck outside, Hayao. Go the fuck out. There's fields and fields and fields. I've seen it on Google Maps in Japan. You've got grass. Go the fuck outside. But then I'd have to leave my garden. Go the fuck outside and go see grass. Just, you can go and see it. Literally, Hayao Miyazaki, touch fucking grass. Go and touch fucking grass. Oh, and also, Miyazaki actually compared fucking gardening, to fascism. Because his wife's extermination of bugs and weeds are, quote, not ecological at all. As a Hobbit-pilled Shire cell, I take offence to that. I fucking love gardening. Like many of you, I'm sure, Miyazaki is also a man of routine, which is very well documented in a range of sources, including the 2013 documentary 10 Years with Hayao Miyazaki. According to Takeshi Honda, a lead animator on The Boy and the Heron, he's a creature of routine. He gets up around 6 o'clock in the morning. He will pick up the trash around his neighbourhood and he'll chop firewood. And then he comes to the studio at 10. He mumbles and talks a lot while he's working, which really surprised me. And he would talk to me often. He always looks like he's having a lot of fun. As for the creative process, Miyazaki would start work on a film by brainstorming whatever ideas he had floating around in that big egghead of his, until he and his producer, Toshio Suzuki, would settle on one. Then everyone in the studio would hear about it, get on board, and start working. And then the entire thing would be scrapped just a week later because something else took Miyazaki's interest instead. Eventually, something would finally hold Miyazaki's attention. Production would then begin in earnest. The film would then usually be announced in December and then released in the summer 2 years later. Now, I know that sounds like a bit of a long time, but bear in mind this is fully hand-drawn animation. That shit takes a while. In the meantime, it was absolute bedlam. Miyazaki would deliver the script and storyboards for the film in 5 chronological batches for the animators to then work on. By the time he was working on the 4th part, Miyazaki would then have a crisis of confidence and start doing random side quests like chopping wood, while the animators would run out of film to actually work on. Suzuki would then have to be called in to get Miyazaki to lock the fuck back in again because everybody else was starting to panic. Eventually, the final part of the film hits a similar roadblock and everybody starts freaking the fuck out because cinemas are booked and deadlines are approaching, with no one knowing how the film that they're all working on was even supposed to end. And then, finally, an epiphany occurs. The son of a bitch delivers once again, and everybody goes through an unbelievable crunch to get the film finished in time, with the entire studio breaking Japanese labour laws out of solidarity with each other. And yes, I too was surprised that Japan apparently has labour laws. Not helping the schedule was the fact that Miyazaki hyper-focuses on very specific details, personally drawing over any parts of the cell that weren't exactly as he envisioned. For a sense of perspective, Miyazaki himself either drew or drew over at least some part of over 80,000 of the 144,000 cells making up Princess Mononoke. He also regularly briefs animators as they awkwardly take notes on what he wants. For instance, Miyazaki once described how a dragon should struggle when pinned down in a scene, by demonstrating the movement while saying, "If you want to get an idea, go to an eel restaurant and see how an eel is gutted. Have you ever seen an eel resisting?" When one animator spoke for the room and answered, "No," Miyazaki simply groaned and said, "Japanese culture is doomed." Yes, Miyazaki, your entire race is doomed because a room of about 8 people have not seen an eel being gutted. That's not overdramatic at all. In another case, Miyazaki used the analogy of a dog refusing to take a pill and asked if any of the animators had ever had a dog. One said, "I had a cat." And Miyazaki simply responded, "This is pathetic. How dare you not have a dog before you got a job at Studio Ghibli?" The animators then went to a vet so that they could record dogs taking their medicine for further study. Other field trips have also included expeditions all the way to Alsace just to study colour hues. You see, according to Miyazaki, animation work isn't something that is over when a certain amount is done. One has to pursue it until one is satisfied. The problem is that Miyazaki's standards are a lot like the standards of women on SSRIs. Don't worry, darling, I'm sure your 6'5" billionaire doctor will be along any day now. But once that long, Herculean, carpal tunnel-inducing effort is finally done and Miyazaki is finally satisfied with his film, he goes on a huge media tour all across Japan. And then, with his work actually finally done for good, he then returns to his home in the mountains for a long rest. A retirement, even. But then he has a new idea about a month later and immediately goes back to work to do it all over again. Miyazaki doesn't really do rest. As he put it, my idea of a vacation is a nap. In the early days, Miyazaki kept an open door and people could just show up and actually watch him work in the same room, at the same sort of desk as all of the other animators. He would even talk to visitors if he felt like it. I bring this up because a funny quirk of the Studio Ghibli building is the presence of 2 aluminium poles and a pair of red hard hats hung on the wall. These were for staff to borrow to get rid of unwanted visitors. But Miyazaki doesn't seem to be up for talking to fans anymore, because he absolutely fucking hates otaku culture. Like, he hates it. He absolutely despises it. Now, Miyazaki didn't actually say anime was a mistake. That subtitle was just an abridged style joke. But make no mistake, he does absolutely despise otaku culture. And he doesn't give a fuck even if they come from high places. Upon it coming out that the then Japanese Prime Minister, Taro Aso, likes manga, Miyazaki declared, "It's an embarrassment. He should do that sort of thing in his private time." That's like Ronnie James Dio calling you cringe because you like metal music. Like, my guy, you are literally one of the founding fathers of the very thing that you are currently calling cringe and embarrassing. Another huge problem that Miyazaki has with otaku culture is that, quote, "Whether you can draw like this or not, being able to think up this kind of design, it depends on whether or not you can say to yourself, oh yeah, girls like this exist in real life. If you don't spend time watching real people, you can't do this, because you've never seen it." Some people spend their lives interested only in themselves. Almost all Japanese animation is produced with hardly any basis taken from observing real people. It's produced by humans who can't stand looking at other humans. And that's why the industry is full of otaku. Really, so only if you've witnessed and experienced and saw something in real life, that is what gives you the authority to actually draw it and put it into animation. Did you actually see a walking castle, Hayao? Did you actually see a fucking dragon? Did you see an old lady with the body of a crow? Did you actually see... Never mind. But I refuse to believe that you have actually seen the Radish God. You literally draw fantasy worlds. So this may be all of that. You have to see it and experience it in real life. Well, if that's the case, then you have done a lot of fucking acid in your youth. And there are a lot of other reasons why Miyazaki is just so full of disdain for the industry. For one, he is really not a fan of what he sees as voice actors, especially actresses, essentially going into business for themselves and showing off their abilities rather than embodying their characters. When Miyazaki said, quote, "especially the young women's voices. It seems like they're all speaking with an 'aren't I so cute' voice. That's unbearable. I always want to do something about that." Now, I'm not really sure if that was a threat or not, but speaking of cutesy stuff, Miyazaki's work often gets him compared to Walt Disney. But Miyazaki, you guessed it, he fucking hates Walt Disney. despite him also being a trailblazing animator who chain-smoked his way into greatness. Miyazaki's problem with Disney films is that they are so sentimental that, quote, "To me, they show nothing but contempt for the audience." Ironically, according to John Lasseter, Pixar animators would actually go and watch a Miyazaki film whenever they got stuck. In 2009, it was revealed that Miyazaki skipped the 2003 Oscars ceremony where Spirited Away won Best Animated Feature because, quote, "I didn't want to visit a country that was bombing Iraq. At the time, my producer shut me up and did not allow me to say that. But I don't see him around today." On that note, about producers trying to stop him, Miyazaki really had it in for Harvey Weinstein. You see, Weinstein tended to act like a localizer from current year TM when it came to making foreign films as commercialised and appealing to the widest Western audience possible, which would have completely ruined Princess Mononoke. I suspect that Weinstein did this out of a need for something to do since there were no on-screen actresses involved. So Miyazaki and Suzuki sent him a katana with a note that read, "No cuts." Obviously, that goes hard as fuck. And it reminds me of Bong Joon-ho fighting to keep the fish scene in Snowpiercer, which Weinstein really wanted to cut. Bong explained that it was an homage to his late father, who was a fisherman, which moved Weinstein enough to let him keep it. You see, family values were very important to Weinstein, because those same family values actually provided him with plenty of Nepo daughters over the years. But after the film came out, Bong admitted that, quote, "It was a fucking lie. My father was not a fisherman." However, Miyazaki has no such honour for his own son, Goro. Yeah, we now get to talk about the way that Miyazaki treats his own son. While Miyazaki makes very wholesome films because he insists that, quote, "I don't want to transfer my pessimism onto children. I keep it at bay. I don't believe that adults should impose their vision of the world on children." It seems like Hayao Miyazaki hasn't imposed much of any sort of influence onto his own children at all. Because you see, Miyazaki is such a workaholic that he was never really home much. As Goro recalled, "It was really just me and my mother when I was growing up. Any advice I needed, I got from her. Until I left home to go to university, my father was just too busy and didn't have the opportunity to even chat with me." When Goro asked Hayao Miyazaki, his own father, for toys, Miyazaki taught him to whittle instead. Miyazaki really turned around and went, "Make your own fucking toys." Goro grew up to become a landscape architect and the owner of the saddest eyes that I have ever seen. That's the eyes of someone with an absent father. But anyway, he was buried so deep in his father's shadow that his most notable design was the Ghibli Museum, which he even ran for a few years. He was also involved in the same capacity in Ghibli Park, which opened in 2022. But he also got involved in the anime industry properly in the mid-2000s to adapt Ursula K. Le Guin's Tales from Earthsea, which his father hadn't been able to manage himself for decades. And Hayao Miyazaki had retired before he could get around to it. And Hayao was not fucking happy when Goro was tagged in his place, because his lack of experience in film meant that, quote, "he can't possibly handle directing. He probably can't even draw." Apart from just telling the entire world that he has no faith in his own son whatsoever, Hayao also really didn't believe that his architect son could draw. Hayao was so against the idea that Suzuki actually had to go behind his back and let Goro make some storyboards to prove that he could actually do it. Le Guin, the author, was also very upset by this, because she really wanted Miyazaki Sr. to be the one to adapt her book. But she begrudgingly agreed to go ahead with this on the understanding that Miyazaki Sr. would be babysitting Goro throughout the process. He didn't. At all. Hayao basically washed his hands of the entire thing, not even speaking to Goro or even looking at any of his storyboards. His only influence on the writing of the film was the fact that it was heavily influenced by a graphic novel that he had created. But this was hardly unexpected, because according to Goro, to be honest, we're not that close. We don't know how to communicate. But hey, Goro managed to make his directorial debut without his father's help. And when Hayao went to actually see Tales from Earthsea in the cinema, he walked out for a smoke during the film. And when he was asked for his thoughts, he said, "You shouldn't make a picture based on your emotions." Yes, that's right, Hayao Miyazaki. Emotions have absolutely no place in art. But if only that was all he said, because he followed that up with, "I was looking at my kid. He's not a man yet. That is all." Goro was 39 at the time. He's such a fucking Faramir. Us right now in this video have probably paid a lot more attention to Goro in just this video than Hayao Miyazaki ever has in his entire life. Did you know that Hayao Miyazaki has another child, by the way? I bet you've never even heard of him. Hayao Miyazaki probably hasn't either. Now, I really love fishing. And if one of my daughters, or my son, if I ever have one, wants to do a little bit of fishing, then I'm going to help them out with it and guide them to be good at it, because as a dad, that's what you're supposed to do. And also, I'll take any excuse to spend more time with my children so that we can grow closer. And Hayao Miyazaki is a very talented animated filmmaker and would be the best person to be instructed by. But when it was Goro's turn to make a movie, his own father, Hayao Miyazaki, despite being a literal expert in the field, gave him no help, no guidance, no assistance, and didn't even look at his storyboards. And then, during the big proud moment when the movie's being shown to the masses, Hayao Miyazaki just shits all over his son's accomplishment to the fucking media. Eventually, Hayao gave Tales from Earthsea some meagre praise when he said, "It was made honestly, so it was good." I honestly think that just saying nothing at all would have been better. Which Hayao Miyazaki did. Hayao never actually said anything directly to Goro about the movie, which the latter actually believes was for the best, because, quote, "We would probably have ended up shouting and fighting. It would have been a messy situation." But that's if they would have even fought at all, because according to Goro, father didn't scold us with words. He scolded us by showing his back. To be fair, it wasn't just Hayao who didn't like the film. Overall, reviews were rather mixed, and the author of the book it was based on wasn't a fan either. Not only was Le Guin very disappointed to have Goro making it instead of Hayao, but she also wasn't impressed by the changes that Goro had made to the source material, backhandedly complimenting, "It is not my book, it is your movie. It is a good movie." One such change was a character brutally murdering his father at the very beginning, which raised enough eyebrows to prompt Goro to clarify, "No, I never felt I wanted to kill my father, because we didn't have that much of a relationship to begin with." In Goro's defense, the story beat was actually Suzuki's idea, because the whole film is more of an exploration of the state of Japan's atomized youth, but in a socially isolated and disaffected way. Not in the way his father explored Japan's atomized youth. Other deviations from the novel and the writing as a whole were where Goro was criticised the most. But at least everyone actually liked the aesthetics of the film. And Goro himself seemed aware that that would be the case from the outset, saying, "I can't and don't think of myself as a writer. I can't be post-Hayao Miyazaki. There's no way I can. I can do work if I'm given a theme and if I have the right circumstances. I can't be like him and have my own studio and make things from original works from my own ideas." In the end, after the release of a very disappointing film on every level, the biggest disappointment of them all was the fact that after Goro was set up to fail and publicly almost being ritually humiliated by his own father as well as the author of his first work, because the main man that everybody actually wanted to make the film had retired. And then Hayao Miyazaki changed his mind. He returned straight back to work and just kept doing his thing. And Le Guin was absolutely fucking furious about that. Because she wanted Hayao to be the one to make the movie, but thought, oh, okay, if you've retired, well then that's understandable. I'll settle for Goro making the movie, just for Goro to make the film, and everyone to fucking hate it, and then Hayao to go, actually, I'm not retiring, I'm coming straight back. Le Guin then said, I am told that Mr. Hayao has not retired after all, but is now making another movie. This has increased my disappointment. I hope to put it behind me. But it was for the best that Hayao never retired, because Goro understood that while Hayao gets 0 marks as a father, he does get full marks as a director of animated films. And on a happier note, Hayao and Goro reconciled somewhat after the birth of Goro's child, because nothing puts everything into perspective quite like fatherhood. Even though fatherhood is a practice that Hayao Miyazaki is ultimately very unfamiliar with. I think it might also have helped that Studio Ghibli's next film, after Tales from Earthsea, Hayao's Ponyo, was, in a sense, an autobiographical apology. However, that's somewhat undercut by the fact that Goro worked on the film as an animator. You had to make your own toys, now make your own fucking apology. Yeah, I know that it was probably just a father-son bonding experience and tacit acceptance of Goro's legitimacy as someone who could work in animation, but wouldn't actually just directly apologising to him have been a lot easier. So Miyazaki is not a great family man, but how is he with his friends? Well, the way that Miyazaki and Suzuki actually met is very Miyazaki. In the late 70s, Suzuki was an anime reporter who made the mistake of approaching Miyazaki for an interview while he was working on his directorial debut. For his trouble, he was told, I don't have time for you. So Suzuki actually just sat next to him and waited in silence until Miyazaki stopped ignoring him. 3 days later. Since then, Suzuki has been pretty much the only person who could talk Miyazaki out of his more outlandish ideas, like shutting down Studio Ghibli. I'm not gonna lie, they remind me a lot of Geralt of Rivia and Dandelion. Another notable collaborator of Miyazaki's, Hideaki Anno, of symbolism so on the nose that it's literally a spoiler fame, recalled, when we were making Nausicaa, Miya-san, on his own, decided to borrow my cassette tape player. And he kept playing the same exact music on it every single day. Then, when the tape got stretched out and tangled up so that you couldn't even open the player's cover anymore, he said, it's broken, so I'll give it back to you. He's really a mean old guy. In addition to that little tidbit where Miyazaki just stole and broke Anno's tape player, the interview contained a lot of good-natured ribbing, with Anno calling Miyazaki that old geezer a lot. But at least Miyazaki seems able to take a joke, being self-aware enough to draw himself as an angry pig. Now, we really don't need to ask Miyazaki for his thoughts on AI. If you even just showed him a Ghibli slop image, he would probably kill you on the spot with a hammer and then commit seppuku in front of your children just to generationally traumatize your entire bloodline out of even thinking of using that shit ever again. But in 2016, some software devs actually showed Hayao Miyazaki a demo of a tool that could help generate monsters and animate the way that such monsters would move. In this case, a zombie dragging itself across the ground by its head. And this tool could create, quote, grotesque movements that we humans can't imagine. Hayao Miyazaki then responded like a totally normal person by saying, every morning, not in recent days, I see my friend who has a disability. It is so hard for him just to do a high five. His arm, with stiff muscle, can't reach out to my hand. Now, thinking of him, I can't watch this stuff and find it interesting. Whoever creates this stuff has no idea what pain is whatsoever. I am utterly disgusted. If you really want to make creepy stuff, you can go ahead and do it. I would never wish to incorporate this technology into my work at all. I strongly feel that this is an insult to life itself. These poor bastards were just trying to show a new technology that could help design and animate monsters in a very creepy and scary way so it looks much cooler. That is literally all they were doing. And then for no reason whatsoever, Hayao Miyazaki just turns into an absolute fucking Karen and goes, well, this reminds me of my retarded and fucked up friend. So, explain yourselves. They weren't trying to offend you about your fucking Ricky Berwick friend. They didn't even know he fucking existed. And also, if seeing that shit reminded you of your friend, that's on fucking you, Hayao. These guys just wanted to show you, someone they looked up to, a cool new way to animate scary monsters. That was it. That was all they were trying to do. Now, I don't know how much you know about Japanese work culture, but when you work in animation and you have the greatest animator in the country just shit all over your work in front of everyone just because you annoyed him over some obscure reason that you had no way of even knowing about, that can nuke your entire career. Look at those devs' faces. Look at how utterly fucking crushed they are. He made one of them fucking cry. He made that man fucking cry. This shit, it was just so uncalled for. It was just so fucking uncalled for. And this clip, this very clip, was one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this fucking video. And the AI tool isn't even the generative slop that we all know and hate. This is just a basic bitch machine learning tool that's now bog standard in the animation workflow. But I think that Miyazaki objected to it because he saw it as a cop-out and a symptom of learned helplessness. Especially since he's quoted as lamenting, I feel like we are nearing to the end of times. We humans are losing faith in ourselves. Do you know what makes me lose faith in the human race? The fact that there are so many people out there that look up to someone like you. And this opposition to technology extends quite widely. Miyazaki doesn't own a DVD player, a computer, or even a fax machine. And iPads, or as he calls them, a game machine type thing, certainly aren't safe from his ire. As Miyazaki explained, it's disgusting. On trains, the number of those people doing that strange masturbation-like gesture is multiplying. Speaking of trains, Miyazaki also isn't happy with everyone on trains reading manga and using their phones. Honestly, I could condense this entire video down to Miyazaki also isn't happy with insert literally anything here because he seems to hate absolutely everything except for the smell of his own fucking farts. I think Miyazaki just hates literally anything that could cause any kind of change in his artistic process. Not just out of a sense of duty to preserve the old ways, but to make things as hard for himself as possible. As we discussed earlier, Miyazaki maximizes stress in his creative process, and he really goes out of his way to suffer for his art. And he brings all of his problems on himself because he believes that there must be consequences for failure, as that sort of pressure is the only way to bring out someone's best work. And even worse, he forces that mindset onto his own staff by often talking about shutting down Studio Ghibli and firing everyone, and then rehiring them essentially as contractors for each subsequent film, but only if they do well. And none of the staff could tell if he was joking or not. Miyazaki's staff actively had their job security fucked with on a whim. We've all seen how much everybody hates that bullshit in the Western gaming industry, and how that and the culture of extreme crunch, amongst many other things, has driven both devs and fans alike to actively yearn for the complete collapse of the AAA market in the hopes that it will be like a great reset for the gaming industry into a more humane ecosystem. And yet, Miyazaki just gets away with doing or threatening to do the exact same thing to his own staff just because he produces good work instead of just ESG Ubislop. I don't care how much you loved Spirited Away. It's not good enough to distract from the fact that tortured artists are complete fucking arseholes. But hey, at least Miyazaki is not a hypocrite. After all, his complete disdain for the industry that brought him fame, acclaim, and fortune also extends to his own work. Because of course, this fucker even hates himself. As he put it in 2013, how do we know movies are even worthwhile? If you really think about it, is this not just some grand hobby? Maybe there was a time when you could make films that mattered. But now, most of our world is rubbish. As a massive fan of movies, fuck you, I'm very sorry that your diamond-encrusted shoes are too tight. Orson Welles was right about self-loathing ingrates like you. But, as a YouTuber and someone who does creative stuff for a living, I suppose I kind of get it. Imposter syndrome is real. But that doesn't justify Miyazaki taking it out on everyone around him. I at least take a degree of pride in my work, and I actually really enjoy working with my staff to make something that all of you might find funny, or at the very least, kind of interesting. Meanwhile, Miyazaki huffily refuses to ever watch one of his own films again once he's finished it, because he just can't bring himself to enjoy the fruits of his own creation. All he can do is see all of his mistakes and missed opportunities instead of the work as it is. And he finds it embarrassing. And that one I also get because I'm the same. Whenever we finish a video, I'll do a single watch through of it just to check and see if there's any editing mistakes or anything new that could be added in, and then I'll never watch it again. Because I hate seeing myself on camera, and I also really fucking hate the sound of my own voice. All Miyazaki seems to care about is the act of creation just for the sake of venting his own frustrations and hang-ups, not the finished work as an end in itself. As far as he's concerned, once a film is finished, it's not a piece of his soul that he has nurtured and released into the world, but just a project that's over. For Miyazaki, there is only time or space for the next film. And make no mistake, there will be a next film. No matter how much he and Suzuki insist that he's retired. While Miyazaki has some bullshit to get out of his system, there will be another film. I mean, how many times is Miyazaki retired now? 3, potentially 4? I mean, considering the fact that he's now 84 and that The Boy and the Heron is Miyazaki's most personal film yet, it seems to be as good a swan song as any. But I doubt that it will be. For one, that's not a swan. And 2, I wouldn't be surprised if Miyazaki decides to stubbornly Clint Eastwood his way to the bitter end. After all, it's apparently easier to draw 100,000 frames about how bad of a father he is than to actually just find the humility to mend his relationship with his own children properly. And all of Miyazaki's bullshit over the years has left him without a successor to continue where he will inevitably leave off. Whenever someone at Studio Ghibli tries to direct something, Miyazaki would backseat drive it so hard that the project basically becomes his. Only one guy managed to avoid falling into that trap, but Miyazaki ended up with the same problem as Augustus and Tiberius. His heir presumptive prematurely died in 1998, and he hasn't found anyone since. The only person he didn't backseat drive was Goro, but I don't think that was to allow him some freedom. I think it's just because it was Goro. So Miyazaki just really didn't give a shit. In 2013, Miyazaki seemed to just accept that Studio Ghibli will probably die with him, when he said, "The future is clear. It's going to fall apart. I can already see it. What's the use worrying? It's inevitable." I mean, that's very easy to say when you won't be the one left holding the bag when all of your staff ends up unemployed without you. But I suppose being a Ghibli alum is the animation equivalent of having been in the WWE. Regardless of how good you are, you will get booked afterwards. Also, saying, "I'm just too damn good and amazing and awesome and humble, I am just so incredible and the best human being on earth, I'm just so fucking amazing that everything will just stop and die when I'm gone." That is one of the biggest fart huffs I have ever heard. Your last banger was Howl's Moving Castle in 2005. Everything else since then has been mid as fuck. Mid as fuck. Tales of Princess Kaguya, pretty good. Quite enjoyed that one, right? But still, it didn't capture the magic of Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, blah, blah, blah. Right? You haven't had a banger in 20 years. All of the top Ghibli movies all came out in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. You haven't had a banger since. Right? You are a great animator, but you're not that good. But everyone else seems to understand that the gravy train will have no other driver. For instance, after trying in vain to get Miyazaki to stick to his third retirement, Suzuki remarked that the whole purpose of Studio Ghibli is to make Miyazaki films. Goro seems to think the same thing too, though he certainly does not want to take up his father's mantle. Can you imagine anything sadder than a son with no interest whatsoever in continuing the legacy of a father who didn't even really give that much of a fuck about him in the first place? Even Faramir rode to what he expected to be his death for Denethor. But Goro has just been burned so much to the point where he won't even entertain the idea of taking over his father's legacy. To be fair, it's not as if he could anyway. While Goro still works in the industry and he even executive produced The Boy and the Heron, his directorial career has been called uninspired by critics. It's unfortunate, but the wrestling fans in my audience will know what I mean when I say that he's more of a Stardust than an American Nightmare. Credit where it's due, there's just no following Hayao Miyazaki. Even if or when Studio Ghibli falls apart, it will make no difference whatsoever to the immortality of Miyazaki's legacy. He is so influential that anime as we know it is practically made in his image. And Miyazaki has such a stranglehold on popular culture that his fingerprints will remain all over animated works for decades to come, even long after he stops drawing over everyone's cells. So, when it's all said and done, Miyazaki is essentially the Bret Hart of animation. A supremely arrogant dickhead with a massive ego who is utterly convinced that he is the greatest to ever do it and that the entire business will go to complete shit without him. All while insisting that all of the up-and-comers would get a lot better if only they took more notes from him. And, most infuriatingly of all, he's kind of right. For better or worse, Hayao Miyazaki is the best that there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. But he's also a fucking prick. Hayao, I know that you're a man that appreciates beauty and the human experience. That's something that definitely comes through in all of your movies. Now, for me personally, the most beautiful thing that I have ever experienced in my life is being a dad. Seriously, out of everything I've ever experienced, nothing comes anywhere even close to being a dad. It is the most amazing and beautiful thing that I've ever experienced. And you had two choices in your life. You could have been an amazing animated director to make a bunch of lovely, wonderful movies for a fan base that you apparently find cringe and embarrassing and you make fun of them and stuff like that. Or you could have been a dad. You could have experienced true beauty. And if you ask me, you chose wrong.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube! Everybody subscribe!